The village of Blackwood was a place of quiet beauty, tucked deep within the embrace of a vast and ancient forest. Towering pine trees surrounded the small settlement, their branches whispering in the wind like voices of forgotten ancestors. A narrow cobblestone path ran through the center of the village, connecting quaint cottages with thatched roofs, each adorned with flower boxes brimming with marigolds and violets. The air was always cool, carrying the earthy scent of moss and wood smoke from chimneys. At the village's edge stood the old oak tree, its twisted roots creeping into the riverbank, a place where lovers often carved their names into the bark. Blackwood seemed like a haven untouched by time, but its shadows held secrets no one dared to speak aloud. Thomas was one of Blackwood's most respected villagers, a carpenter with hands as rough as the wood he worked with, and a heart as soft as the morning dew. He was tall and lean, with sandy brown hair often tousled by the wind and kine, hazel eyes that reflected the gentle soul within. Thomas wasn't wealthy, but his craftsmanship was unmatched. His furniture was in every home, and his quiet generosity earned him the love of the villagers. Yet, despite his humble success, his heart ached with loneliness. One fateful autumn evening, as the setting sun painted the forest in hues of gold and crimson, Thomas ventured deeper into the woods to gather firewood. It was there, by the river's edge, that he saw her. Seraphina. She sat on a fallen log, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders like a river of flame. Her pale skin seemed to glow in the twilight, and her emerald green eyes held a depth that both enchanted and unsettled him. She was wrapped in a dark cloak that clung to her slender frame, her delicate hands clasped in her lap as though she carried a great sorrow. "Are you lost, miss?" Thomas asked, his voice gentle but cautious. Seraphina looked up, her lips curving into a soft smile. I suppose I am," she said, her voice melodic yet tinged with melancholy. "I was traveling, but I lost my way in the woods." Thomas offered to guide her back to the village, and as they walked, they talked. She spoke of distant places she had seen, and a life that seemed both magical and tragic. Thomas was captivated by her grace and mystery, feeling a pull toward her he couldn't explain. When they arrived in Blackwood, the villagers watched her with suspicion. "Where did she come from?" they whispered. "What's a woman like that doing in a place like this?" But Thomas defended her, insisting she was kind and harmless. Over the weeks, Seraphina stayed in Blackwood, and the bond between her and Thomas deepened. Despite her reserved nature, she brought warmth and light into his life, and soon he could no longer imagine a day without her. Thomas proposed to her under the ancient oak tree, offering her a simple wooden ring he had carved himself. "I don't have much," he said, his hazel eyes filled with earnest love, "but my heart is yours if you'll have it." Seraphina hesitated, her emerald eyes glistening with tears. "Are you sure, Thomas?" "There are parts of me you may not understand." "I don't need to understand everything," he replied. "I just need to know you'll stay by my side." She smiled, though a shadow passed over her face. "Then I will." Their marriage was a joyous occasion, though the villagers remained wary. For the first year, Thomas was the happiest he had ever been. Seraphina filled his home with laughter, tended to their small garden, and seemed to truly love him. But slowly, cracks began to appear. At night, Thomas would wake to find her gone, only to return hours later with vague excuses. The animals in the village began to disappear, first chickens, then goats. Thomas noticed how Seraphina's once radiant beauty seemed to grow sharper, almost otherworldly. When he confronted her, she would only smile and change the subject. One moonlit night, Thomas followed her into the woods, hidden behind the shadows of the trees. He watched as she knelt by the river, chanting in a language he didn't understand. Her body, twisted unnaturally, her auburn hair seeming to ripple like flames. When she turned, her eyes glowed a deep crimson, her face a grotesque mask of beauty and horror. "Seraphina!" Thomas's voice broke as he stepped into the clearing. She froze, her monstrous form fading back into the woman he loved. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said, her voice trembling. "This is who I am, Thomas. I am not like you." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his heart shattering. "Because I love you," she cried, "and I was afraid you would leave me if you knew the truth." Thomas tried to hold on, to believe their love could overcome her dark nature. But Seraphina's promises were empty. The crops began to wither, the villagers fell ill, and the forest itself seemed to turn against Blackwood. The final blow came when Thomas discovered her with another man, her demonic form fully revealed. She laughed cruelly as Thomas stood frozen in betrayal. Did you really think love could change what I am? A demon does not belong to anyone. Heartbroken and shattered, Thomas fled into the woods, his mind unraveling under the weight of betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and the villagers began to speak of a madman who wandered the forest, carving wooden figures of a woman with glowing eyes. As for Seraphina, she disappeared, leaving behind only ruin and whispers of her curse. Blackwood became a place of caution, a village haunted by the tale of a man who gave his heart to a demon and lost his sanity in the process. The story of Thomas and Seraphina lived on, a chilling reminder that love, when betrayed, can destroy even the gentlest of souls. Years passed, and Blackwood remained shrouded in unease. The once vibrant village grew quieter, its people wary of strangers and fearful of the forest. The tale of Thomas and Seraphina had become legend, a story told to children as a warning. Yet in the heart of the woods, Thomas still wandered, a ghost of the man he once was. His long beard and hollow eyes told of a life consumed by sorrow. He spoke to no one but the carvings he made, figures of Seraphina, both in her beauty and her monstrous form. But Blackwood's peace was not to last. Strange things began happening again. Livestock disappeared. The river ran red with the reflection of the blood moon, and a chilling wind swept through the village each night. People whispered in fear. "She's back," they said. "The demon has returned." One cold autumn evening, a group of hunters ventured into the forest, determined to find the source of the disturbances. Among them was Lucas, the blacksmith's son, a brash young man, who dismissed the tales of demons as mere superstition. As they moved deeper into the woods, the air grew thick, and the trees seemed to close in around them. They found Thomas sitting by the river, carving another figure. "Thomas!" Lucas called, though the man barely looked up. "The village is in trouble again."
"Is it her?"
"Is Seraphina back?" Thomas's knife paused mid-carve. For the first time in years, his voice broke the silence. "She never left." The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" Lucas pressed. Thomas turned to face them, his hazel eyes glinting with a mix of despair and something darker. "You think she's out there," he said, gesturing toward the trees. "But she's here." He tapped his chest. "She's in my heart, in my mind. She left her curse behind, and I carry it with me. She will never truly be gone." The hunters were unnerved but unwilling to leave empty-handed. "We need to end this, Thomas," Lucas said. "Tell us how to stop her." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Stop her? You can't stop her. She's not just a demon, she's a shadow. She lingers in every fear, every doubt, every crack in your soul. You can't kill a shadow." But Lucas wasn't convinced. He and the hunters left Thomas behind and pressed deeper into the woods, determined to find and destroy whatever was terrorizing Blackwood. As the sun set, the forest came alive with unnatural sounds. Low growls, whispers carried on the wind, and the distant sound of laughter that froze the blood in their veins. One by one, the hunters began to disappear, their cries echoing through the trees before being swallowed by silence. Lucas was the only one who made it back to the village, his face pale and his body trembling. "She's real," he gasped. "I saw her. She took them." The villagers panicked, locking their doors and windows, lighting candles to ward off the darkness. Lucas went to Thomas, begging him for help. "You loved her once," he said. "You knew her. There must be a way to stop her." Thomas looked at Lucas with hollow eyes. "Do you think I haven't tried? Do you think I haven't begged the gods to free me from her shadow? She's a part of me now. There's no escaping her." But deep down, Thomas knew there was one thing left he hadn't done. One thing he had always been too afraid to face. He needed to confront Seraphina. That night, Thomas ventured deeper into the woods than ever before, past the river where he had first seen her, past the clearing where he had discovered her true form. The forest seemed alive, its shadows shifting and breathing around him. Finally, He reached a place he had never seen before, a circle of stones surrounding a tree that seemed to pulsate with a dark energy. She was waiting for him. Seraphina stood beneath the tree, her auburn hair glowing in the moonlight, her emerald eyes as captivating as ever. But there was no warmth in her gaze. "Thomas!" she said, her voice smooth and cold. "I knew you'd come." He stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Why? Why did you destroy me?" She tilted her head, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "I didn't destroy you, Thomas. You destroyed yourself. You loved me even when you knew what I was. You let your love blind you to the truth. I loved you because I believed you could change," he said, his voice breaking. Her laughter echoed through the clearing. "Change? A demon cannot change, Thomas. Love cannot cleanse what is born of darkness." But Thomas wasn't the same man he had been all those years ago. He had spent years living with her shadow, and in that time he had come to understand one thing. Her power came from his pain. "You feed on my despair," he said, his voice steady now. "You've kept me trapped because I let you." Seraphina's smile faltered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done." Thomas stepped closer to her, his hazel eyes locked on hers. "I release you, Seraphina. I release the love I had for you, the pain you caused me, and the shadow you left behind. You have no power over me anymore." For the first time, fear flashed in her emerald eyes. The shadows around her began to flicker and fade as Thomas's resolve grew. "No!" she cried, her voice trembling. "You can't let go of me." But it was too late. The darkness that had bound them both began to unravel, and Seraphina's form dissolved into the wind. The clearing grew silent, the oppressive weight of her presence lifting. Thomas stood alone beneath the tree, the night air cool against his face. For the first time in years, he felt free. When he returned to Blackwood, the villagers noticed the change in him. His shoulders were no longer weighed down by sorrow, and his eyes, though still touched by the pain of the past, shone with quiet strength. The forest grew quiet once more, and the village began to heal. But Thomas would never forget Seraphina. He carried her memory not as a wound but as a lesson, a reminder that love is powerful, but when given to the wrong person, it can become a prison. And so, Blackwood found peace again. Though the villagers continued to tell the story of Thomas and Seraphina, a tale of love, betrayal, and redemption that would echo through the ages.